Oh, just gonna hop on, Mariana. You gotta unmute yourself. Sorry about that. Hi, everybody.
Sorry about that, everybody. Good day again. Thank you for joining us for Conversations at Noon. My name is Mariana Garcia. I'm a museum educator at Connecticut's Democracy Center at Connecticut's Old State House, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all to today's program, Preparing for Hartford's 400th birthday. Believe it or not, our capital city's 4th centennial is just around the corner. Founded in 1636, Hartford will be turning 400 years old in 2035. But the history of the people of the Connecticut River Valley, the Wangang, the Scatokuk, Golden Hills Pagosset, and Nipmuc, and all other indigenous peoples who have called this land their home goes back thousands of years, long before the first European ever thought to cross the Atlantic. When that fateful day finally came, Hartford was one of the first towns that the English settled in the area, and it would go on to become one of the two capitals first of the colony and then of the state of Connecticut. As one of the oldest cities in the U.S., Hartford has seen a little bit of everything during its history. And now that we are at the cusp of this milestone anniversary, we start to envision its future through a new lens, one that integrates the environmental, economic, social, cultural aspirations of its residents. That's where Hartford 400 comes in. Hartford 400 is a coalition of some of the region's major organizations working together to forge a comprehensive vision and action plan for the Valley and the capital city. Joining us today to talk about the Hartford 400 plan is Jackie Mandyck, Executive Director of the iQuilt Partnership, which lays out a strategy and design for linking Hartford's cultural and physical assets and making public spaces more walkable, engaging, and vibrant. Prior to this, Jackie was the Deputy Commissioner at the Connecticut Department of Consumer Protection. She was also the Director of Community and Institutional Relations for Trinity College and one of the principals leading the Neighborhood Initiative, which included the Learning Corridor, a 106 million public school campus for grades K through 12. Prior to that, she held her most cherished job, which was working in the family business in upstate New York. Jackie, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Mariana. A pleasure to be here.
So before we start, I just want to let everybody know that if you have any questions during the program, you can post them on the comments section, and we'll make sure to get to those at the end of the program. And also, if you have the time at the end, you could take our quick post-program survey, which is linked on the video description. We would love to hear your feedback and know what kind of programs you would like to see in the future. So without further ado, Jackie, you can take it away.
Thank you so much, Mariana. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for spending some time with me today and sharing and learning a little bit about Hartford 400. It was just over 2 years ago that the iQuilt Partnership brought this concept to the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, and they have been so generous in funding some of our work to date on Hartford 400. What Hartford 400 is really, it's an umbrella initiative that aligns several different visions into one larger vision for the capital region. We've gone ahead and we have, over the past 18 months, looked at hundreds of plans that were developed not only for the city of Hartford, for the state, for other municipalities in the region, from CROG, which is our regional organization, planning organization as well. We've taken so much of what you see in Hartford 400 from these plans that thousands and thousands of people have put time and energy into creating these and giving advice and giving their input about what is most important in our capital region. From those, we've established 5 key principles that we truly believe are overarching principles for the Hartford 400. The first is Green 400, which is to make our environment more sustainable. Grow 400, to make our economy more prosperous. Move 400, which is to make our transportation more mobile. Live 400, our community more equitable. And Play 400, our culture more vibrant. These are not principles that we have not seen before. These are overarching themes that we saw again and again through those plans that we reviewed and through people and organizations that we've spoken to date. I first want to go through a little bit of history and a little bit of geography so we can have a worthwhile discussion on Hartford 400. As many of you know, we always get compared between New York and Boston, but we also have this tremendous natural access between the mountains and the shore. We are strategically located in our region to be one of the most vibrant capital cities. If you do some research, you can look at it as far as how many people per square mile are in each of our designated regions. If you look to the north and west a little bit, you'll see that Boston has about 3,100 people per square mile. And if you look down to New York City, they have 12,800 people per square mile. We in the capital city region have 1,100 people per square mile. We believe that our area is opportunity for wonderful and tremendous growth because we believe that we can increase that percentage of people per square mile. Now let's look a little bit. If you assume that the center dot here is the old State House, which it is in our map right here, and you can see the river coming down. If you look at 4 miles, both north, south, east, and west, you will find that it gets you into our contiguous municipalities from the city of Hartford. A mere 4 miles gets you into these contiguous towns. In addition to that, a 20-minute walk from the old State House, you can be into almost the center city of East Hartford. You can be to the northern edges of Hartford, into the West End, and also into the South End. Taking the valley, the city, and also our natural resource of the river, we have looked at all these plus the plans and come up with Hartford 400. But Hartford 400 wouldn't be the same if we did not take a look at the history of where and why we are where we are today. The valley we share has a natural history. And if you go back years and years, it started off as an ancient rift valley. After that, it was a glacier valley, a glacier lake after that when it was melting. It turned into a beautiful river valley after the glacier receded and melted and turned into a beautiful river. That river in the 1600s made for beautiful, beautiful agricultural land. And the settlers in Salem and Boston knew that it was only a 10-day travel over to this beautiful, fertile land. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention our other municipalities, both Windsor and Wethersfield, that were actually incorporated prior to the city of Hartford. As I mentioned, we're also an agricultural valley. We turned into a seafaring valley, which really was an industrious, and this was our economy for so very long. We had an industrial valley with Colt and many other manufacturers in the city of Hartford, a pastoral valley, our beautiful hills and valleys. And then we have become an urban valley and eventually our capital valley right here. All of that has led us to look at these 5 different principles and how we can forge together to create some common goals and common visions that will lead us to Hartford's 400th birthday. And when I say Hartford 400, I'm really meaning as a regional vision that has a centerpiece of our capital city. We have and looked at some signature projects that are both in the valley, in the city, and also along the river. And I want to talk to you about those today. But I do want to mention, this isn't just about big infrastructure projects. This is not about only that. I'm going to talk about a few of those today. This is about what people hope and dream for our capital city, our capital region, how it's going to feel when we turn 400 years old in a mere 14 years from now. I want to start off, here is a beautiful, our beautiful region as far as our capital region. And if you look at the lines between our towns, it almost represents a broken mirror. Almost that I took a hammer to a mirror and I established those definitive lines. Have we ever thought, and can you imagine, if we stopped looking at the borders between our municipalities and instead emphasized the connections between our towns using our main streets or our town centers? Imagine the connections and how we could connect from one location to another using those city centers or those municipal centers. Have you also thought about what we could do if we harnessed the strength of those municipalities that lie within our Connecticut River and are exactly on the Connecticut River? What could we do that we could work together to strengthen our bonds to the river, which was, part of our biggest economy, um, you know, hundreds of years ago? And then imagine if we could go ahead and we could focus specifically on the avenue system that lead to many of the contiguous towns from Hartford into our contiguous towns in our capital region. Imagine if we could focus our transportation, some of our housing, our retail. Imagine if we took more investment in those avenue systems to strengthen those and to create connections with our neighbors. If we also looked at Hartford has an incredible park system that dates way back into the early 1900s when we were noted as one of the best park systems in the entire country. If you look at how we might be able to connect those parks, and then if you looked at how those parks connect again to our contiguous towns, how could we strengthen those relationships and those parks to really become a centerfold for our region? And now I want to talk a little bit about one of the biggest projects that we've seen that could be transformational for the entire system. And again, I want to go back and say that there are small things and big things that we can do with Hartford 400. It's not just about large, costly infrastructure projects. But during this process, we want to allow people to dream. We want to allow them to dream from, vibrant retail corridors to better educational systems to really trying to address some of the racial injustices and inequities that have created some of our infrastructure projects of past, and also look at some of the climate initiatives that we need to address as we move forward. So let's take one example of I-84 and I-91. And as you can see, this is one of the pieces of infrastructure that we have right now with this intersection. If you look back historically, we used to be connected to the East Hartford through a covered bridge. It was beautiful. It was a way to connect these two economic powers. Unfortunately, made of wood, the bridge burned down. And it really caused strife in the area because there was no longer that connection, that ease of connection through a bridge. For several years, they built and constructed through the ingenuity of the city of Hartford. They connected a temporary bridge. This was washed away 3 times in the spring thaw until they built a steel bridge, which went ahead and sat temporarily there until they had envisioned the beautiful stone arch bridge that was constructed and then eventually opened to connect east to the west. If you look at when this bridge was built, you can see how wonderful they thought of the connections, what we call today as complete streets. As you can see the bridge, you see the promenade, you see green, you can see the trolley car, the infrastructure for the trolley cars, you see the roads. This was what we love, this type of complete street design now, where you have all of it all in one area. The bridge adapted very well when the automobile came on board and started to really make an insurgent in the city of Hartford and the region. But as you all know, in the 1930s, we experienced tremendous floods, and the Army Corps of Engineers took matters in its own hands to try and help us avoid those economic disasters that we had for each of the floods in those early 1900s. As you can see, originally they thought that the floodplain would only go until 22 feet, as you can see on this on the screen right now. But the floods came in at plus 37, And so the wall, our dike system right now, was built at plus 47. And you can see some of the construction that took place during that time. And this is what we have today. We are separated completely from our riverfront through the highways that were built back in the 1950s and 60s. You can see some of the original designs that were done for this. And in many cases, they wanted to go ahead and build some of our highways and wrap Bushnell Park in highway system. Thank goodness the leaders did not allow that to happen, but they did allow some of the other stuff that happened that really divided our city. And as you can see here, over 100 buildings were taken down to create the infrastructure that we see today. And this is what we have today. We have a large spans of property that we have in the region that's taken up by highways. And here again. And so instead of this, we now look at this and this. So if we have an opportunity, a once in a century opportunity to look at this interchange, what would happen if we could get rid of the interchange and we could divert traffic possibly through a small tunnel in the north end and maybe something in the south end, and we could create a new city avenue that went from East Hartford all the way through Homestead, all the way up to West Hartford, Bloomfield, and Simsbury. If you notice the peach colored squares on that, that is the land that we would be able to get back by taking down the intersection. It is over 28 acres of land that you could use to develop in the heart of downtown Hartford. You could also look at riverfront recapture over 20 years ago, brought us back to the river, but you could look at taking that to the next step and create something what we're calling River Road. Now, let me tell you a little bit how we could go ahead and do this or what it would bring to us as well. As many of you know, there are 2 locations from Hartford to the river where you can access those, only 2 at the present time. We would propose that you would get to 13 access points, some where you could drive and some that would be walkable. Just to talk a little bit about that, if we look from left to right on your screen and we're starting down at the river, if you assume that that's at 0, that's a base of 0, and the walkway that many of us have walked on for a long time, the pathway is at plus 12, and we know that our flood wall has to be at plus 47. If we take that for granted right now, what would happen or what could happen if you could go ahead and you could take the train tracks and put them at plus 22? If you could go ahead and put the through traffic at plus 22, and you could build a new river boulevard up on 47 that would take the traffic that was going into our downtown center and put it up, very much like a cap. If you look at this, 91 currently has to go from plus 22 up to 47 to meet that interchange of 84. So you'd really be putting both the train tracks and the through traffic at grade level and capping it above. And then what we would get back is something of the original vision of complete streets where you have trolley car, well, not saying that we would do a trolley car, but there was trolley, there was train, this complete streets vision of walking and transportation. You could get back that in our center city. And these are just some of the renderings that we have proposed. You would have an expanded riverfront. As you can see, you have more development out in front. On the left-hand side, you can actually see the Science Center. You'd have direct access by walking across a boulevard and over into the park. You would have access from the river all the way from Dillon Stadium in our south end, all the way up to the north end. And you would create connections that would go on these central avenues that we can focus on that lead us into other municipalities in our contiguous towns. Now, I do want to just take a few minutes And I want to talk about, as much as this would change Hartford, let's talk about East Hartford for a second. East Hartford has as much, if not more, of the construction of the highways in there right along the river. And it takes up acres and acres of valuable land over in East Hartford. But what if, when we redesigned how you would cross over the river, what if you could do a similar design and economic development over in East Hartford? And how much would that transform the East Hartford section of the side as well? That is some of the large scale projects that are possibilities for Hartford 400. But I want to go back to the core, and I want to talk about the five principles. How can we make our area, our capital region, Hartford, how can we make it more equitable? How can we make it more prosperous, more mobile, more vibrant, more sustainable? And as I mentioned in the beginning of this presentation, it's just not these high expensive infrastructure projects, but they're also the small things that we see day to day, week to week. This is not talking about things that will change and we have to wait for change over the next 14 years. There are projects out there that are weeks away from being done, a year or two, 5, 10, that could potentially move us to realize some of these goals by the time Hartford turns 400. And I think with everyone's help and input, we can identify some of these and we can put together a real plan and a real vision for Hartford 400. If I could, one of the things that I do want to mention, I think we all know that at times it's much easier to have a deadline, to have a goal. And I think Hartford 400 gives us that. It's not that my organization is going to try and take on projects of this magnitude, but it's all about all of us coming together with what each of our organizations or individuals or corporations can bring to the table to realize Hartford 400. It's working together and not at odds, and realizing that Hartford is an amazing city and it's an amazing region. And we have such vital assets that we just need to all work together to move in a right direction. So with that, I really want to emphasize, what is your Hartford 400? What is your goal? What is your organizations? What is your corporations? What do you want to see Hartford become in the next, 14 years? And that's why we want to take this time today. And I welcome you to contact me separately as well to really share with us what's next for the city. What do you imagine? What do you dream of for Hartford?
Thank you so much, Jackie. That was so interesting. It's really amazing to think how intrinsically linked the city is to the river and transportation, how it really builds a town, pretty much.
Mhm.
So I have a couple of questions for you, if I might. The first is, how did iQuilt get involved in Hartford 400? And how did you actually get involved in iQuilt?
Well, it was a long time ago, in 2000, and I want to say 2007, 2008. The iQuilt partnership really developed out of the Bushnell. And the Bushnell was working on a project to look at what their area was like, what they wanted to be, to really look at how they could um, work within their neighborhood. And we worked with a wonderful person by the name of Doug Sussman, whose father, Mike Sussman, many of you might know. Doug was born and raised in the capital region and born right at Hartford Hospital. And so he came in to work with us on a plan. He's an urban developer, an architect, came in with us to work on a plan and expanded that, just not from the Bushnell, but all of downtown Hartford. At that time, I was actually working for the state of Connecticut and was asked by the governor at the time to go ahead and be the liaison to the project. And so I started there and then moved over to be its executive director. About 2 years ago, we envisioned trying to take what was done for the iQuilt plan and how could we bring it larger. And thus was born Hartford 400, when we really started to do the math and realized that, oh my gosh, at that time it was 16 years. In 16 years, we're going to be 400 years old. And what kind of opportunity could we take at that time? What could we start with planning and organizing and getting a coalition of people to try and get some things done before we turn 400?
All right. So I think we all know that there's a lot of stark differences of opinion or schools of thought, you could say, towards Hartford. Some people see it as a place so full of potential and opportunity, and some other people, unfortunately, see it as a lost cause, you could say. So could you give us an idea what you think those differences, those polar opposites of opinion come from, and what might be fueling them?
I've worked in Hartford for the past 25 years, and I think the differences of opinion is people's level of understanding of the city. I think if you play in the city, if you work in the city, you find those joys and you find those magic, and you really become part of the city. And I think for those who don't take the opportunity to enjoy the riches of Hartford, whether they be parks, cultural institutions, um, food, I'm just amazing. If we don't take advantage of those, I think people have a different opinion of Hartford. So I think those of us who get to know Hartford and its assets and its resources really enjoy what the capital city provides to us and how important it is for our region. And I think all we have to do a little bit is be patient with some people and really, I would say, reintroduce them to Hartford and show them what we have.
Amazing. And what struggles does a city like Hartford, maybe what I mean by that is a capital city, you could say, what struggles or problems would they find in uh, facing a project like this and revitalization that are particular to this kind of city?
Um, I think our biggest opportunity is to work together and not work in silos and to bring one vision forward. And I think that's what we have at this moment. And I think we need to take advantage of that, and we need to move forward. I think any city, I don't think there's any unique struggles in the city of Hartford. I think we could find many cities who had some of the same struggles that the city of Hartford does. I will say the city of Hartford, we have got to figure out a way to look at the disparities of how many tax exempt properties that we have in the city of Hartford. We have to make sure that state government actually funds pilot to a point where we can go ahead and the city of Hartford has the money to go ahead and function. And I think that will help decrease the burden that you see from time and again when the city comes to the state for extra help. I think we've got to come up with a solution for that. Now, that's Jackie's opinion, but I think there's ways to solve that. And I think some people can get in a room and really assist Hartford in that way.
Right. And, projects like this, maybe not of this scale, but projects to revitalize the city have happened before. So what strategies are you employing that you might consider to be different to those previous attempts, previous projects?
Yeah, I think the first thing, and I think why Hartford 400 is a little different, is the very first thing that we did was not go out and start to talk to people, not try and just take a blank piece of paper and start scratching about what we wanted. But what we did is we went back, many of us in our organizations, in our companies, or in even governments, we're asked to do a lot of planning, and we're asked to produce documents, and then they look really pretty and we bind them up really pretty and we put them on shelves in our offices that always looks very pretty, and we never take them out. And I think one of the first, actually the thing that we did first was we took off those plans and we dusted them off. We wanted to know, we looked at the history, we looked at the plans, we took our first look by using all of that material that has come before Hartford 400 to build the base of this plan. Many, like I mentioned before in the presentation, there have been thousands of people who have lent their voice to planning efforts in the city and in other municipalities. It's just not the city of Hartford. And we think it's about time to be able to take those and start to work with those documents that people have spent hours and a lifetime advocating for. So that's, I think, what's different from this planning process. In addition, we're doing some creative things as far as some outreach opportunities as well. So I think with all of that, it's a little different than what you've seen in the past.
That's great to know that so much work from the past has not gone to waste and it's being put to good use now. So that's an excellent segue actually to my next question. What goes into the planning stages, pre-planning stages, I should say, for a project of this scale?
A lot of, as much as we want to look forward and imagine what can be and dream about what can be, I think the first is you always have to look in the past. So, like I said, we looked at those plans, we did a lot of reading, we did a lot of research, but you have to also look at um, some things that aren't necessarily written down. You have to look at how you want to forge forward by looking back and what kind of historical elements do you want to try and incorporate into something moving forward. I think you also have to really be open minded about where it's going, and you have to make sure that you're listening not only to the people who are cheering you on to move forward, but you have to listen to the people who disagree with you and think that things should be different. So I think taking that all into um, the same mix and trying to make sure that you work in this planning method is very, very important. The other thing too is a lot of conversations. You have to, I mean, especially with the pandemic, it has been challenging, but this isn't just a plan for Hartford. This is a plan that is definitely capital city based, but this is a plan for the region. And so working with our regional partners is extremely important and talking to them about the importance. And not only, for those of you who don't know, in the state of Connecticut, every 10 years, you have to do something called the Plan of Conservation and Development. And it's a plan for your municipality, your city, about where you see growth opportunities, development, what you want to try and get done in the next 10 years as far as economic development goes and planning. And one of the things that I think is so important to that is that you look at your own city, but we have to, or municipality, but you have to also look around you in the assets that other municipalities have that contribute to your municipality and take those and talk. For instance, um, Bradley Airport is very important to the city of Hartford and also the municipalities. It's important for us to talk about that in our plans because that is a regional asset that we must strengthen and that we must pay attention to.
Thank you. And in preparing the Hartford 400 plan, I know that you surveyed over 2,200 people, residents in Hartford, and students and people that work here, and just to get their perspectives on what they think their communities needs and what the city is in want of. And how was this public input used, and what roles do community leaders and residents play in the execution of the plan?
We're still in the gathering stages of that. So we're using that survey data. And then we're also using a lot of conversations that we're working with different people in the city and also in the region to have with others about what their hopes and dreams are for Hartford 400 and trying to take our base of what we looked at with all the plans and then adding in those conversations that we've been having and the survey data to really start to come up with um, a plan for Hartford 400. So we're taking all of that information and trying to put it in. I think one of the hardest things that any planning process takes is how do you make sure that people's voices are heard? So if people tell us something and they've spent time to share with us their hopes, their ideas, their visions, their organization's vision, how do we make sure that they know that we've listened to them? Might not get it right all the time, but we're very cognizant of the fact that we have to pay attention to that. And that is something that we have to keep reminding ourselves on a daily basis as we're working through this process. And I think this cannot be done. The iQuilt Partnership's a very small organization. We are advocating for people to really think about what their Hartford 400 is and how do they contribute to this vision. We will not be able to do it by ourselves, but what we want to do is we want to inspire people to take on what is their Hartford 400 vision.
Thank you. And let's talk now about the 5 parts of the Hartford 400 Plan framework. It's green, grow, live, move, play. So how are these frameworks identified and developed? And also what sets them apart from each other, but how do they work together to become part of a larger comprehensive vision?
Yeah, the 5 were really developed as we were searching through all past plans. They were central themes that came up when we were looking through the other plans. And I think one of the biggest things is you can't really put these in silos. You can't um, put these in one specific segment. You want to go ahead and, the perfect project or program is one that is all across the 5 sectors, that touches all upon the 5. So we think the best projects are those that have components of all of these. But we really think that all 5 you really can't argue with them. I think everybody would want, um, you know, to be more equitable, for the region to be more prosperous, for it to be more mobile, to be more vibrant and more sustainable. So I think they're tough to argue with. And we hope that there's a lot of intersection and a lot of cross fertilization amongst all 5 of these principles.
Thank you. So in a survey, 39% of Hartford residents that were surveyed and asked to name the city's greatest strength said it was arts and culture. So can you elaborate on what the cultural sector can contribute to a city on the rise, and what makes this one of the strengths of Hartford?
Yeah, if you look at our cultural community, I mean, let's face it, um, it's a huge economic point for the city of Hartford and for our region. It's a point of education. It's a hope of creativity, of innovation. Our cultural organizations are very creative and very innovative, and that helps drive not only their organizations, but the creative culture, the innovative culture of all of our area. So unfortunately, many of these organizations have been hit very, very hard during the pandemic. But when they come back, I think they will come back very, very strong, because they are a vital asset of our economics, of our education, and of our creative culture that we have here in the capital region.
Thank you. And this is a question that I thought of during your presentation, actually. You mentioned the floodwaters going above the flood wall that was built, above what was anticipated when they were building the wall. So what considerations are being taken in terms of climate change, and how that might be changing the landscape around the city, and what's being done to mitigate that? What projects are being done to mitigate that?
Yeah, I applaud the city of Hartford. They have a sustainability plan that they worked extremely hard with. They have a sustainability director, Shubhra, in the city of Hartford. If those of you who haven't seen the plan, I highly recommend that you look at it. There was a lot of community input to it, and I think it's one of the best that I have seen for municipalities in the state of Connecticut. So I think taking on some of those things in Hartford 400 and those goals of that sustainability plan, but also one of the things that we want to see within Hartford 400, is many of you heard, is those levees um, for the that protect us from the floods, are in desperate need of some repair and maintenance. And one of the things that we have to do is we have to address those. But more importantly, we need to address how we can look at that in a different way, shape, or form to make our communities more sustainable. Going forward, it's got to be one of our key initiatives in Hartford 400, with our organizations, with our corporations. We have to look at sustainability initiatives and how that will impact us in the next 14, 15 years.
Absolutely. And how are you working in tandem with the other towns around the Connecticut Valley and the state in general, actually? And why is cooperation so important within these towns?
We have spoken with several other towns in the region, in the capital region. We have chatted with them about Hartford 400 and this vision. We've gotten some good feedback from them. We're trying to understand where their goals lie, where their visions are, so we can understand it and incorporate it into Hartford 400. As I mentioned during the presentation, Hartford, Hartford and our municipalities in our capital region, their futures are intertwined, and we have to view that. And so there are some assets that are in Hartford that are very important to the region, and there are some assets that are out in the region that are very important to Hartford. And working together has to be one of our primary goals in Hartford 400 about how do we move forward and move towards these goals and these visions that would make our region something that we were really, really proud of by the time we turn 400 years old in a mere 14 years.
Thank you. And what lessons have you taken from Hartford's past and its history to inform the plan?
Wow. We've made some mistakes in the past. I don't think anybody is ever trying to do something that would hurt a segment of the population or hurt different groups or different organizations. I think we have to go ahead and we have to be very, very self aware about what we are doing and the impacts to the community and to the region. We have to be very intentional. We have to look at what can happen that's good, what can happen that's bad, and how do we try and minimize anything that's going to be harmful. So, in other words, if you look at 84, there were many reasons why 84 was wonderful and marvelous when it was built, but there are so many reasons about why it truly hurt Hartford, hurt its economy, hurt its, the society and the fabric of what we see in our community today. And I think we have to be very, very conscientious about how we're moving forward. And I think that's one of the reasons why you always have to look in the past to see how we try and not make the mistakes of what has already happened.
Right. And on that note, actually, has the project changed or evolved since its inception or even before the pandemic?
That's one of the things that we are trying to make sure is that we can be flexible, because we know that this changes day to day, month to month, year to year. So we are trying to maintain as much flexibility as we can. We want to take advantage of opportunities when they arise. So I think that's one of the things that we have definitely lessons learned is we have to be very nimble and very flexible as we move forward. And I think that's the pandemic has definitely emphasized and really taught us that lesson very well. How can we move forward with some obstacles in our way? And therefore, we have to maintain and be flexible. So I would say that's probably the number one thing that we've learned is how can we be flexible and how can we try and make sure that we're moving progress forward, even when we have a lot of outside influences that are making it a little difficult.
Absolutely. Flexibility should be step number one in every plan. So on that note, also, how has the pandemic affected the planning and progress of Hartford 400?
Slowed a little bit just because it's, the best form of communication is not necessarily over a Zoom or over email. It's really a face-to-face sit down and a chat. So that's been a little bit of an impact to us. But it's also changed the way that we try and gather information from other community members. And I think we've done a good job in figuring out how we can transition to what our original plan was to another plan. So I think that's been the biggest thing. Again, flexibility is definitely what we have learned in the past year. But I think that's the biggest thing as far as how we just keep moving forward on a daily basis.
Absolutely. And could you tell us a little bit about what has been accomplished so far with the plan?
Mhm. So we've gone ahead and we've looked at, as I mentioned, we've looked at the plans. We have a draft. As you see, we have some information that we've gone ahead and put together using those plans. We would hope that some of this can be used in the future when money becomes available. We're hoping also that we can build some coalitions of like-minded organizations that will work on certain aspects, advocacy, projects, programs that move us towards Hartford 400. I think one of the things that we have, that we talk about a lot now is this is a lot of planning. All of us do a lot of planning. Our next step will be to implementation. We can't miss that step. We've got to figure out where we can start to implement aspects of Hartford 400 and continue. So I think that's where we'll be focusing our attention now that we've spent so much time planning. Now we have to move and make that bridge to implementation.
Of course. And what do you see as vital for the success of Hartford 400?
Oh, I think we could have success with Hartford 400 if we could get people on a similar vision, on a similar path for what Hartford wants to be when it turns 400. If we can get more people working together, if we can get more people um, working on that vision and working towards that vision. I often say that, we want everybody, driving north or moving north. If we can get everybody going in one direction, I think that will be a huge success for Hartford 400. It's not necessarily a big project that gets completed or this, it's the hope and the feeling. I think people, prior to the pandemic, I have to say in my over 25 years of working in Hartford, I have never felt a sense of hope and inspiration that the city of Hartford has been experiencing in the past few years. And I think that is still on the rise. And I still think Hartford has so many things to offer and so much we can still do. And I think we need to just push that forward and keep moving forward.
Right. And so ideally, what do you hope the average day would be for a Hartford urbanite once the plan is successful and done and it's been a success?
Um, I would hope that people who live in Hartford, I hope people who visit Hartford, I hope people who work in Hartford would be able to enjoy a day. I mean, that they would see more feet on the street, that they would see more nature, that they would see vibrancy, that they would see a place that people are um, walking and biking. I think that it'll be more of a feel than actually what you actually see when Hartford turns 400.
It's lovely. Well, thank you, Jackie. We do have a couple of questions from the audience. If we could take a look at these. While you were talking about the interstate, Deborah asks, what would be the cost of a conversion like this?
It depends upon what exactly you put into it. So if you're just looking at 91 and 84, there's been some cost estimates, but in those cost estimates also repairs the dikes. It also looks at some high-speed rail. It also looks at some future bus lines, possibly almost like a fast track system up to the airport. So there's many different components. It's just not I-84 and 91. So if you look at all of that, you're talking into the tens to probably 10, 15, 17 billion dollars. But again, that would include rail, that would include a lot of other components to this.
Mhm. And Donna would like to know, is there consideration of incorporating eco-friendly bicycle traffic into the plan to facilitate travel both within Hartford and between Hartford and surrounding towns?
Sure. So the city of Hartford actually has a bike plan, and I believe West Hartford has a bike plan. So all of that is definitely advocating for in any of the Hartford 400 plan. I mean, bicycles and, the new trail that Riverfront Recapture is doing up to Weathersfield, all of that is integrated into a more walkable, bikeable region that we can, that's we say it right off the bat, transport's more mobile. It doesn't necessarily mean cars or buses. It's all transportation. And bike paths is one of those that makes it more mobile.
Mm-hmm. And Anne is asking, what is the status of John Larson's vision to bury our highway downtown?
So we've had some wonderful conversations with Congressman Larson, and he likes the way that the development of River for Road and also I-84 would work. It doesn't necessarily mean a large scale vision of a tunnel that Congressman Larson originally envisioned. It has two smaller scale, shorter tunnels in it, and that he's been supportive, very supportive.
It's good to know. Rebecca asks, is there a big celebration planned for
I'm hoping to be retired by then, Mariana. You can do that one then. I am not out buying candles right now, so there's not a big celebration planned right now. And I believe, I'm sure you have a historian or two on the call or watching this today. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the same year Connecticut celebrates its 400th birthday as well. So I hope that there's going to be a very big party and a big candle, and I hope there's going to be a very big cake.
No, very big cake. And Kate would like to know, how long ago did the planning process begin?
Just under 2 years ago. It was really kicked off about 18 months ago.
And Deborah asks, is there plans to create bike access for the southern end of East Hartford and Glastonbury into Wethersfield?
East Hartford and Glastonbury into Wethersfield. If I'm not mistaken, and I'm not quite sure, Deborah, where you're talking about, but if I'm not mistaken, there is some state money that is going into looking at the bridge that bridges from Glastonbury over to Wethersfield and adding a bike access to that. I think they're working on both sides of the bridge. And if I'm not mistaken, that's very small. The walkway right now over the bridge is very tiny. It might only be 4 feet. And I think they're looking at extending that. But I'd have to look that up for you and let you know.
Just like a check real quick with our audience. Is everybody hearing us okay? Anybody? We are having some audio issues?
I think we're okay. Deborah commented that she was having some trouble with the audio, so I figured it might be good to just check. Kendall just commented that she can hear us. So,
okay. Yeah, sorry about that, Deborah. Well, where were we? Donald asks, is Bike Walk CT part of the planning coalition?
Bike Walk CT we have worked with in the past, and we've also worked with BCCO. And we, in our analysis of all of our plans, we have looked at the East Coast Greenway. We've looked at those communities and municipalities who have bike plans as well.
Thank you. And Kate asks, are there other cities that have held similar celebrations to this?
Well, Salem just celebrated their 400th year last year. So, is it Salem? Is it Salem that we're celebrating? So yes, there are communities that have done it. There's others that are planning. You know, we had a 300 celebration. If you look back in the history books, you can see when the 300 celebration was of Hartford. We have some of that information available and looked back at that. We've also looked at other areas of the country that are celebrating not their 400th, but their 300th or their 200th plan. So we're looking at some of the opportunities that people have done. One of the things that Doug Sussman has really alluded to a lot when we first started talking about Hartford 400, if y'all could think about a little bit when, let's take, for example, the LA Olympics. LA was having a lot of trouble getting a lot of things done. They set up an Olympic committee. They received the Olympics. I think they're in 2026, if I'm not mistaken, that they're getting the Summer Olympics. And one of the things that happened when they were awarded that bid is everybody started to come together, stop the bickering, stop the argument, and they started to create a vision because they knew they had a deadline. They knew they had to be ready. We're trying to do the same thing with Hartford 400. We want people to come together, to work together, and to have a shared vision. And that's what's very important. And we're hoping we can utilize that, similar to like what LA used the Olympics as our goal to try and get to Hartford 400.
Yeah, birthday is always a good motivator for people to get out and do stuff, isn't it?
Yes, definitely.
Well, I don't see any other questions from the comments. If anybody has any other questions, please do post them right there. But in the meantime, Jackie, is there anything else you would like to add to our conversation?
Yeah, Marianne, I would welcome people to go to the hartford400.org website. We've got some additional information there. There's my contact information and my colleague Phil Shattuck's information on there as well. We welcome people to reach out to us, give us comments, give us feedback. We want to hear from people. This is a large scale vision, and we're hoping that a lot of people participate and give us some feedback on this. So we would really love it for people to reach out to us.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jackie. This was such an amazing conversation. It's so good to learn about all the stuff that's going on and will be going on in the city in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Before we log off, I'd just like to take a quick minute to let everybody know about some of our other upcoming programs here at the Connecticut Democracy Center. On Tuesday, January 26th at noon, we will have our next Conversations at Noon from Public Servant to Private Life, where retiring legislators Joan Arasimowicz, Gail Lavielle, Russ Morin, and Senator Len Fasano will come join us to reflect a little bit about their years in the Connecticut General Assembly. And then in Thursday, February 4th at 3 p.m., we'll be joined by Professor Dan Broyld from Central Connecticut State University for our Legislative Landmark series, and he will be talking to us about the Gradual Emancipation Act of 1784, slavery and abolition here in Connecticut. And finally, on Thursday, February 18th at 6 p.m., we will have our next Encounters program. This one's titled Origins of Hip Hop, and it will be hosted by the Hartford History Center at Hartford Public Library. And again, if anybody has the time to please fill out our post-program survey, which is linked on the description of the video. We would like to hear your feedback. And yeah, thank you everybody so much for joining us. And Jackie, thank you again for being here with us today. And I hope everybody has a good afternoon.